Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. I've had a few interactions with manufacturing leaders where I asked them to tell me something good. And some of the responses I've heard is living the dream or same old, same old. And on Mindfulness Manufacturing here, our listeners, we're coming here to manufacture their own greatness and not to be average. Yet, some days it is hard to keep that energy up, going back to what I call the same four walls of building. And we know, if you've heard previous episodes, we talk about the way you show up determines the way people feel. And the way people feel determines the extent to which they can engage. And that impacts everything about the outcome of our relationships. Today, I'm excited because if I'm ever short on energy, I call my friend Dustin E. James, and he is the top to the shop floor energizer, presenting to over 500,000 leaders on this topic. He's here to share his vision on how manufacturing is energizing, how to keep us out of the average into the amazing mindset. Welcome, Dustin.
Thank you, Trevor. Thanks for having me.
So what's the fix here, man? What's going to be the easy answer for us today?
Well, there's never an easy answer, but the reality is, in the world of energy, it comes in different forms, right? There's all sorts of different energy level that we all bring, unique perspective. But the biggest thing really is kind of embracing what I call the grind, right? Life can be hard. We're facing personal and professional challenges every day, whether it's workforce, whether it's tech, whether it's competition. Like, we get hit from a lot of different directions. And if you come across anybody who's successful, like we talk about grinding every day, and whether we're grinding for the green, right? We want to grind to make more money, have nice things. There's nothing wrong with that, right? There's some of us that grind because we want titles and positions, and there's nothing wrong with that. Or we're grinding to get better in the world of growth. So I think sometimes when you can embrace that, it's not a bad word, right? I know we're always trying to take shortcuts, but the reality is, if you can kind of embrace it a little bit and know that there's going to be challenges, obstacles, the process isn't always easy. It's actually a little bit easier to push through with that energy because it's coming, right? It's part of the process, and it allows us to bring our energy and the ebbs and flows in the workforce.
Well, that really fits in well because sometimes it does feel like a grind in manufacturing because we're going back, and at times it feels like we're going back. It is the same old, and we're in that grind. So where have you seen it successful, Dustin? And because I know you work with a lot of different leaders in these areas where they have maybe a routine grind, but they bring that fresh energy every day. How do we do that?
Well, especially as leaders, it's important that we, identify our team and the roles that we play, right? There's not a single person who doesn't want to be recognized. I always joke because most of my life, I've been that hard charger, whether it's in sales and leadership. I'm not that type of guy that's needed an attaboy. Quite frankly, a lot of times I would always tell managers or those leading me, like, go help somebody who needs it, right? Like, I'm that hard charger. I'm self-motivated. I want to be the best at what I do. And I understand not everybody's wired that way, but my wife reminded me one day, she's like, you need to be recognized. And I'm like, no, I don't. It's like, no, I don't. She's like, yes, you do. And we went back and forth, the banter. And of course, right, she ends up being right because she goes, you need to be recognized by your customers that you're doing a good job. And I think as a team, it's important that we kind of shift that mentality that we don't want to show up to be second, right? I love when you talked about from average to greatness, right? I talk about that a lot as a speaker, that 7-letter, horrible, disgusting, vulgar A word, starts with A, ends with E, average. And it's one of those words that just we mass produce. It's so easy to get in a rut and just say, I'm showing up, I'm going to do the bare minimum, right? But as leaders, right, it's our job to do more than average, right? I love to talk about the world of amazing. I love to be around amazing people, amazing companies, amazing teams, amazing individuals. And we need to share that, right? And some of that goes back to that energy, that very first part of your question, right? Embracing the grind. It's going to be hard, but it's my job as a leader to remind my team how important they are, right? Just the little things. I always use that as when we talk about grind in life, like I love to share stories. And early in my career, right, I graduated from college and my first job was working at a racetrack in Wilmot, Wisconsin, right? So doing the marketing, sales, driving a push truck on the racetrack and cutting marketing deals with Miller Lite on the side. And it was this jack of all trades, right? Small business, You got to get your hands wet. You got to dig your feet deep. You got to do whatever it takes to help the show go on. Well, of course, helped grow sales over 2 years. And somebody came in and bought the company. And they said, hey, Dustin, you're doing a great job, but we got our own team. You're out of here. I'm 26 with a master's degree and I'm out of job, and I've increased sales for 2 years. And I'm sure there's people that can relate to this. Getting fired, it's not fun. There's nothing enjoyable about it, right? So I was out of job, and I grew up very blue collar, right? My dad was a nuclear power plant guy. Like, I grew up very blue collar, wasn't going to go on unemployment, right? So a couple of weeks goes by, a month goes by, I need a job. So I went to see Don Durham. He owned this heavy duty truck repair and towing business, but he used to race cars at the racetrack. Like we talk about the human connection, right? This was somebody I knew. So I went in and I said, hey, Don, I'm not the best mechanical guy in the world, but I'll do whatever it takes, right? I'll sweep floors, do whatever. He's like, yeah, you're one of those smarty pants guys. Well, you can help my wife do paperwork. I'll pay you $10 an hour, right? This was, late 1990s. I'm like, $10 an hour. I'll take it.
Sold.
Yeah. So he hires me. I work with his wife for a couple of weeks, and then it starts to turn into this parts and service manager job. Like this, it starts to turn into this rewarding job, learning things that maybe I wasn't necessarily meant to do. And he goes, hey, there's a state bid contract going from the southeast state of Wisconsin up to Milwaukee during rush hour. And we drive tow trucks in the morning and in the evening. He's like, hey, put this bid package together, right? So I sit down with his wife and we figure out how to buy trucks and payroll and all the numbers, right? That management, that leadership side of things, making sure it makes sense. We put the bid package together, drive up to Madison, Wisconsin. We beat 3 other companies. So of course I drive back. Everybody's excited. Like, this is awesome. And Don's like, hey, this is great. I got to buy more tow trucks. I'm like, awesome, Don. And he goes, and you're going to drive one. And I'm thinking, who, me drive a tow truck? I'm 26 with a master's degree. And we all have those horrible, what I call horrible, no good, rotten days, right? No matter how much we try to bring our best, there's outside factors, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's a vehicle issue, money. Like, we all have those challenges. Well, I had one of those horrible, no good, rotten days, and I'm driving a tow truck. And most people probably know a flatbed tow truck is not the smoothest thing going down the interstate. So I'm now 27 years old, driving a tow truck with a master's degree. Not really what I signed up for in life, right? I'm ornery and grumpy. I come up over this hill and I see a car broken down, right? So I turn my lights on. I pull the tow truck up behind the car and make sure traffic's cleared. So I get out and I slam the car door as hard as I can, almost like I was Superman, thinking it's going to go through the other side. And I approach this car and I could tell the windows down. And all of a sudden I start hearing this faint voice. And it's a woman crying, an elderly woman, right? So of course, I'm a nice guy. I help her get out of the car, walk her down the passenger side of her car, get her in the tow truck, pull the tow truck up in front of her car, lower the flatbed, get the car on the flatbed, winch it up, hop back in the tow truck. And this woman turned to me and said, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Here I was, 27, probably a little cocky, thinking this job was beneath me. I'm above it. And this woman taught me what appreciation was in that hard moment, that no good, horrible, rotten day, right? When things don't go right, there's always a life lesson. And that story has really transformed how I look at things. Even having to take out the garbage, having to do the hard things, the things maybe you don't want to. Maybe there's an opportunity to help somebody. Maybe there's a chance to motivate somebody. Maybe there's a life lesson that we're all meant to do. And it could be the simplest thing on a Tuesday morning, going into the shop at 7 a.m. There might be that life lesson in that experience. So I always encourage, like, in those hard times, there's going to be a life lesson. It may not hit you now. It may be at lunch break, having a conversation with a coworker. But that's the reason we have to show up and be present in what we do. Because if we just embrace average, we're just that hamster in the wheel going through it over and over and over and over again. And that's not really what anybody wants. I don't think there's an employee that wants it or a team member that wants it. There's definitely not a manager or a leader that wants that, right? We want to try to get our very best. And as leaders, I think it's important we share some of those stories, because people only see us for where we are, right? And as we're motivating our teams and letting them know that. Yeah.
And I see that you've connected the dots for me, Dustin, because I'm just thinking, because I felt that even whether you're in leadership, whether you're loading parts, but you're coming into that grind. And it kind of takes us back to the whole mindfulness aspect, that there's people out there that have other issues in their life going on. And how do you keep your energy up? This is what we're talking about. Yep. And that connection to people, and what else do they have going on? Because, if you can have dialogue, understand why are people thinking a certain way, and, what is going on maybe outside, what conversation can you get into with someone else that there's a deeper meaning besides adding value to the parts that we're manufacturing. We call it value add, putting these two parts together, welding them together, creating value to the products that we're manufacturing. But the reality is that it's people that we're working with, and the process will take care of itself. But when we're stuck in that grind, how do we, when we're slamming that door and we're dragging our feet, or we're kicking that bolt across the shop floor because we're just frustrated with something else in our lives, we get stuck, right? We get into that average routine of just going through another day. But it's not another day. It's a different day. It's a new day. And someone on that shop floor is looking to connect. How do you keep yourself there if you don't have that tow truck story?
If you don't have the tow truck story. Yeah, well, and the reality is every step is closer to the end, right? As long as you're moving forward, right? As much as we want to say we're stuck, both through an energy level, right? To keep that thing moving. Like I'm that hard charger, right? I love to try to motivate teams. I love to push them through the mental toughness, but I also understand that there's plenty of team members that sometimes they are giving their very best, right? Sometimes they are giving their very best, and we haven't communicated that, right? As leaders, I always want to know anybody on my team, like what not only motivates them, but where do they want to be in this process, right? Like you may have some people that never want to be in a leadership position, right? They want to just show up. Well, what else motivates them, right? By showing up and getting the job done, maybe a hair sooner, right? Might allow them to be more family time, or a chance to go see their kid play sports or whatever. Like it's important that we know more than just, I'm on this floor shift and this is my time slot and this is my team. Like what motivates them? What's important? Do they enjoy to fish or hunt, right? Like there's seasons of that. And it's our job as leaders to really kind of dig into that to help those people get through some of that, because we're all on different intellectual levels. We all have different work habits. We all have different challenges and obstacles. And in order to get people out of those hard times, we have to do more. And some of that is asking better questions and knowing that, hey, their child was in the newspaper, or their kid got honor roll, or they're off to college, or maybe they're not married, right? Yeah. Maybe they enjoy a single life. It's important that we know more of that than just saying, hey, we got to hit this number, because each one of us, in order to connect, we've got to know each individual team member ticks a little bit differently. Even if you're in charge of 50 people, like you have to be vested. You've got to do more as a leader than just average, right? It's easy to punch in, punch out, and say, here's our numbers, crack the whip, let's get it done. Let's look at data and see where it is, right? It's the people business.
That appreciation, and we did talk about that recently on an episode. But the appreciation, a couple of things you made me think, Dustin, is that it does go both ways as well. Like for our own appreciation for ourselves. And I think that's what resonates with me more with what you said, is when you're talking to your wife and just recognizing that we got to appreciate what we're doing ourselves as well. And something I just read was, when someone does give you if someone is thankful for what you've done, and some of the best things you can just say is that you're welcome. Yeah. Just the language that you use, like, thank you. And you know what, and when people says, oh man, I really appreciate that. And I say, that's just my job. No, you don't say that. You say, you're welcome. You connect with people, and that whole energy level can come from that empathy of, like you said, connecting with that person, showing that appreciation, but you got to take it as well. You got to give it, and then you got to take it. And then that's how that kind of culture, or just that whole spirit of that plant, can shift by just kind of getting that some back and forth. Secondly, it makes me think of a situation coaching a client, and one of their material handlers or fork truck drivers for different health reasons is just not delivering as quickly as the average. And what I loved what she did was, instead of just putting this person on a performance improvement plan, it was just really like, I see you're doing your best. I love what you said there, Dustin. Like, I see that you're doing your best. And if you start with that, do we really need to go through the whole discipline process if we can connect? Where did that come from? Like, just that whole mindset of like telling people that I see you're doing your best.
I actually learned it from coaching my kids' sports, right? I was a collegiate athlete, right? So I have my expectation, and it's always coming back down to eye level. Like, I always read an article, when you coach kids, take a knee so that you're at their level. And I had one kid that just said, I'm trying my best. And it really kind of hit me that if it's happening in 7, 8-year-old kids, right? It's happening to 35-year-old people on the floor. before, like we're all at a point where we're having to navigate a busy world, right? There's only 24 hours in a day, which is 1,440 minutes, 86,400 seconds. It's not a lot of time, right? When you think about it, it's just not. And not everybody's got the best time management skills. Not everybody's organized. Some people can live in a chaotic life and they do really well, right? We're all, duplication will never create differentiation. So we don't want to get caught up in thinking that Trevor, you need to be like me. My wife says the world only needs one Dustin, right? And I'm okay with that. But it's important to, I think, recognize that there are a lot of people that are working hard and they're trying, right? And as leaders, we're trying to equip them with the tools that we can best. And there's a lot of leaders who are doing the very best they can. And I think once you kind of embrace that, right, even embracing the grind and embrace where you are and what you're doing, don't try to run from it. Don't try to disguise it, right? And honesty is going to get you awfully far in the world. And being very forward, it allows you to build trust with your team, right? Like it's okay. Hey, if this is where we are, now we can make another strategy or another plan or figure out what alternatives we need to do to get there.
When I think of when I was running plants, what drained my energy? And I think it was, trying to push someone to change their behavior, to change their success in their role, and not really understanding, like, why aren't they getting that project done or fixing that piece of equipment? When I really lacked the skill and I was probably had the least amount of energy was when I was just trying to be hard on them, right? Like, I'm going to push them a little bit harder because that will motivate them. That took the energy out of me. And I know I certainly didn't give energy to them. So that's a good lesson in itself, right? Is that, can you see that looks like you're doing your best, and let's just have a conversation like that. And I like to kind of talk about that situation where it's you, it's me. And then over here in this other chair is the problem, right? Like that's the result of the line maybe, right? But we're just two people, maybe just some guy from Iowa and some guy from Strathville, Ontario, and we're working together and, but over here's the outcome, right? And whatever's happening, it's not working right now with you and I. So what's going on?
Yeah, well, and that energy, over the years, I've just learned comes in so many different areas, right? Like energy can be, the motivator, but it can be the collaborator. It could be the empathy. And I think it's recognizing who they are, right? I'm perfectly okay with sitting down with somebody and saying, man, I love this about you, right? When you talk about where people are, like whether a conversation, we're always selling something, we're negotiating, we're trying to get there, we're trying to meet where we need to be, right? So recognize the great things, even in the biggest jerk in the world, right? He's got something good about him. There is
absolutely.
You can find it, right? He might be hard-nosed, but you want something, maybe he shows up every day 10 minutes early to work, right?
Yes.
That's it. You showed up, like, you're that guy, the early riser. That's great. Like my father, he was that half hour early, right? My mom was just like, why do you show up early? He's like, because I never want to be late. Right. Yeah. But you could count on him because he showed up a half hour early, no matter where we went, whether he took me to practice or he was going to work. Half hour is on time. Yeah. In those conversations, just, embrace the positive side of things, right? Because if there's a problem, it's already negative, right? We're trying to fix something, solve something. And if you're going to bring more negativity into it, it's not going to end well. So let's figure out how we can, bridge the gap of, all the great things that you do. And quite frankly, even if they only have one or two things, you're actually going to feel pretty good about yourself already in the conversation because you're making somebody feel good.
It does come down to mindset. It reminds me of this guy, Tim. And sometimes I would remember thinking, I just wanted to avoid the conversation with him today because he's going to be complaining about, something. But when you just said it, was like, oh my gosh, Tim was always there early and his points were always valid. Like there's always truth in there and it was coming. And I think if I would have had this conversation with you now, Dustin, 15 years ago and heard your podcast, I could have maybe changed my mindset that it probably wasn't Tim, right? It was probably me. And it comes back to like how we show up. That's where that energy comes from. And what's the story here that you want to have our listeners remember about you? What's a good manufacturing? Or I know that you've done some work with some different that blue collar areas. And what's the last story for us here today?
Yeah, it's really trying to understand the importance of being that leader, right? At the end of the day, just last month I was talking in Missouri for asphalt pavers, right? Working with teams and trying to lay the asphalt the right direction, and they're dealing with they're dealing with specs, they're dealing with the government, they're dealing with all these challenges, right? And at the end of the day, like, it comes back down to just your team and your people and caring and having to figure out. There's always going to be a kink in the chain. I think of all the companies I've worked for, all the businesses, all the teams that I've led, like, there's always going to be a challenge. That's the way it is. There's too many moving pieces in the world, whether it's supply chain shortages, whether it's, staffing, like, we're all in the same boat. We're all trying to face those challenges. And at the end of the day, the people you do have on your team are an integral part of all of our success. The small things, those pennies, nickels, dimes, all the small things in life, they add up. And when you can accumulate as many of those things as you can in your favor with positive attitude, with energy, embracing the fact that we need to show up and give our very best. Don't show up to be second. It's going to be a grind. It's going to be challenging, but realize how important each and every person is and let them know how important they are in that process, right? Because I want to go to bat with the best team possible. And sometimes, there's people on injured reserve. Next man up. What are we doing to build the best teams we can? And I'm going to tell you right away, it's not easy. I'm not going to sit up here and say it's a home run every time, because it's not. But I do want to have people that believe in the guy or the girl who's leading us, and you're doing all the right things, and you're trying to be honest, ethical, and keep people motivated and put them in a situation to be successful as a team.
Normally I would say, what do you want to lead the listeners with? But I'm going to tell you what I want you to lead the listeners with. And it's about the days in front of us, because I've heard the story, and we all need to hear that, Dustin.
Yeah. I was blessed. I had some great grandparents in my life, and my grandfather, he was a war veteran, entrepreneur, plethora of jobs. He had 86 jobs in his lifetime, right? And he was just, he was, my family jokes, he could have been a gypsy. He was all over. He would do whatever, right? He was jack of all trades. And it was a really great life lesson, because he always taught me a ton of stories and the things he said and the things he did. But even over time, right, as he's getting into his early 80s, he's got oxygen up his nose, and those conversations and those life lessons got shorter and shorter due to his health. But the one thing I took from my grandfather, and it wasn't what he said, it was just the things I observed, that no matter how good things get or how bad things become, you have to believe that your very best days are always ahead of you. And if you really break that down, like, no matter how good things get, right? The plant, we're hitting numbers, things are rolling, life is good. And if we get that even 100 days out of the year, sometimes that's a great year, right? But then we also have those hard days. Maybe it's supply chain, staffing, tech, training, those hard days. If we believe our very best days are always ahead of us, they're going to trump even the better days and the hard days. Like, that's what gets us up out of bed in the morning. That's what gets us excited. That's where creativity, collaboration, this is where it starts. And as leaders, we need to remember our very best days. If you're 65 right now, right, you're building legacies. You're helping the next person up. If you're that new guy on the block, right, your best days are still ahead of you. Like, this is what keeps us going. We have so much knowledge and stories and experience to share with the world. Don't hold yourself short. Bring it, because your very best days are always ahead of you.
And it takes me back to my cousin Shanna, lives in Thief River Falls, Minnesota. We're standing in the driveway at her mom's, my aunt's, in Red Lake Falls, and we're both turning 50 around the same time, both having some challenges in life. And we said, the next 50 years ahead of us are the best years, and I will never forget that moment with her. And she's been working in a manufacturing plant very hard for 30 years. And, you kind of keep your mindset and keep your energy up by just these items that we talked about today. And I appreciate your stories, and I feel better than before I talked to you, Dustin. So for our listeners, if they want to know more about you and get some more of what you do on your professional speaking, how can they contact you?
Yep, I'm on all social media platforms. If you want to check out the website, it's momentsleadership.com or dustinspeaks.com. I work with organizations, leadership teams, conventions, professional development days, lunch and learns, a little bit of everything. I'm very, very blessed to get to do what I get to do and meet some wonderful businesses, organizations. I'm a curious person, so every day is always enjoyable.
Well, relationships, we talk about that as a key, and grateful that I met you through some different speakers, and our friend Shark, he was back on episode 77. So if you hear me using the phrase manufacturing greatness more, which I do love, there is a debate between Shark and Dustin on who came up with that, but I did steal it. So this is the power of collaboration. Thanks so much for coming on, Dustin.
Not a problem, Trevor. Thanks for having me.
Hey folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.